Good morning, students. Today's lecture is on Ellen Showalter. Ellen Showalter, who is famous for her gynocriticism, the term which was coined by her, and she is well known for her feminist criticism. So, in this lecture, we are going to read about the life and works of Ellen Showalter. Ellen Showalter was born on January 21st, 1941, Boston, Massachusetts, United States. She was an American literary critic and teacher and founder of Gynocritics, a school of feminist criticism concerned with women as writer, with the history, themes, genres, and structures of literature by women. Sholder studied English at Byron Moore College. She did her graduation BA in 1962. Then she went to Brandeis University where she did her MA post graduation in 1964 and the University of California, Davis, uh, where she did her PhD, Doctorate of Philosophy, in 1970. She joined the faculty of Douglas College, the women's division, the Rogers University, in 1969, where she developed women's studies courses and began editing and contributing articles to books and periodicals about women's literature. She later taught at Rogers University and Princeton University, neither of which hired women when she began her teaching career. She retired from Princeton as Professor Emeritus in 2003. Sholder also spent time as a freelance journalist and media commentator. Sholder developed her doctoral thesis into her first book that was known as A Literature of Their Own, British Women Novelists from Bronte to Lessings in 1977. That was a pioneering study in which she created a critical framework for analyzing literature by women. Her next book, The Female Malady, Women, Madness and English Culture, from 1830 to 1980, and it was published in 1985. It was a historical examination of women at the practice of psychiatry. She also wrote Sexual Anarchy, Gender and Culture at the Fin de Siècle in 1990. Sister's Choice in Tradition and Change in American Women's Writing in 1991. Histories, the Historical Epidemics and Modern Culture in 1997. A controversial exploration of the history of mass evolution, mass hysteria inventing herself. Claiming a feminist intellectual heritage in 2001. Which follows the evolution of feminist intellectual from the 18th to the 21st century. Teaching literature in 2003, Faculty Towers, the academic novel and its discontents in 2005. An analysis of the academic novel and its relation to the real-world institutes of higher education and Jury of Her Peers 2009. A survey of women's writing in the United States from its origins through the 1990s. The Civil Wars of Julia Ward Howe 2016 is a biography about the American author. Sholder also edited several volumes including The New Feminist Criticism 1985 and Daughters of Decadence, Women Writers of the Fin de Siècle in 1993. Ellen Sholder invented gynocriticism, a feminist critical theory and approach that focuses on the woman writer, the meaning of a text, the structure of literature written by women, including its history, themes, genres. She introduced this new method of reading specific text and its implication in an essay towards a feminist poetics in 1979. Because of the relative success of gynocritics, especially of Sholder herself, whose prolific works demonstrate the method in all its possible combinations. Daughters of Decadence, highly praised by Times London Literary Supplement when it was published in 1993, applies gynocritics to 19th century short fiction in Britain. The very foundation of feminism have shifted from practical concerns to intellectual ones. In the Dictionary of Literary Biography, Showalter is named one of the founders of feminist criticism and still one of its most important and influential practitioners. She began by concentrating on British women novelists, studying their work not as a part of tradition dominated by male writers but as a separate tradition altogether, even a subculture with its own values, conventions, experiences, and behaviors. Her subsequent books, especially Sexual Anarchy, Gender and Culture at the Vintage Sickle in 1990, include literary histories that contribute to the modern area of gender studies, since she is concerned with the language, especially the rhetoric of popular fiction and periodicals, as these reflect the changes in themes and tensions at the end of 19th century and at the beginning of 20th. Feminist criticism and a literature of their own. Showalter has had a significant academic career also. After earning her BA from Byron Moore in 1962 and MA at Brandeis in 1964 and PhD at English from the University of California, Davis, 1970, she began teaching at Douglas College, Rogers University in 1970 and rose steadily to full professor by 1983, while at Rogers she received the Christian and Mary Lindback Foundation Award for Distinguished Teaching 1976. The following year she was a Guggenheim Fellow in 1977 to 78 and she spent an additional research year as Rockefeller Humanities Fellow 1981 to 82. Since 1984, she has been Avalon Professor of Humanities and Professor of English at Princeton University, where she remains an active member despite frequent visits to the places as diverse as Dartmouth College Critical Theory School, the Salzburg Seminars, and Oxford University in 1989. Showalter's leap to national prominence came in April 1997 when she appeared with Lene Cheney on Crossfire Sunday, a popular confrontational television show, as a guest during a discussion of the causes of Gulf War syndrome. Her recent book, Histories, Historical Epidemics and Modern Culture in 1997, proposes that afflictions like Gulf War syndrome arise not from exposure to chemicals but from the mind of the individual. Naturally, this was not a popular opinion or one that people suffering from modern maladies like chronic fatigue syndrome were going to admit without loud arguments against it. It must be said that Showalter does not consider these conditions faked or made up. On the contrary, she contests these claims by suggesting that we are a society that does not understand or really take seriously the effects of psychological stress and conflict and anxiety and a certain kind of helplessness on our bodies and on our emotions. After Crossfire's speakers had finished for the evening, one of the hosts, Book Babel, remarked that Showalter was driven from a book signing because of a confrontation with people who have legitimate suffering. It cannot be easy for Showalter to keep explaining that psychological suffering can be just as devastating to the body as physical suffering. Nevertheless, she continues to pursue this frequently marginalized line of inquiry and research. One might note that she does not ever connect hysteria to hypochondria, which is imagined illness, though her critics seem to believe her choice of term means the same thing. In a balanced review of his stories, Jen Shreve applauds her slow, well researched study of the history of hysterical epidemics and their modern day manifestations. The inclusion of alien abduction, satanic ritual abuse, recovered memory, and multiple personality disorder with Gulf War syndrome has made Showalter the object of intense scrutiny by the very press. She says assists in spreading the contagion of these illnesses rooted in the unconscious. There are stories widely circulated on the internet of people suffering from some of the conditions Showalter lists who appear at events where the author scholar is present to attack her verbally. These unfortunate people seem to be confirming uh, her diagnosis rather than refuting it. She writes, the United States has become the hot zone of psychogenic diseases, new and mutating forms of hysteria amplified by modern communications and fantastical anxiety. It is only fair to point out that David Futrell, a regular contributor to Salon and a self diagnosed hypochondriac, recognizes a moral vision in Showalter's unmasking of the forces making people sick in modern society. Indeed, the shrill tone of her loudest critics makes it absolutely necessary to read and understand Showalter's position on hysteria and psychosomatic illness. It is characteristic of Showalter that she continues to work as editor of two prestigious scholarly publications, Women's Studies and Science, Journal of Women, Culture and Society, and to contribute regular essays to respected academic periodicals. Among her other works are a literature of their own British women writers from Bronte to Lessing's, The Female Malady, Women, Madness and English Culture, 1830 to 1890, 1985, Speaking of Gender, 1989, Sister's Choice, Tradition and Change in American Women's Writing, 1991, Hysteria Beyond Freud, co-author, 1993, Scribbling Women, Short Stories by 19th Century American Women, 1997. Thank you. Thank you very much.